sitting in my parents' house in Accra, Ghana, watching reruns of one of my favorite TV shows, Sex and the City, when I couldn't help but wonder, what can I do to fight the single story of Africa? What can I do to change the conversation about my country and about my continent from the reoccurring theme of war, poverty, and famine? I was kind of confused as to why those deeply seated questions that I've had my entire life would pop into my head while watching a show like Sex and the City, but that's what happened. And I think it happened because it was the answer. To fight the single story of Africa, instead of following the sexual escapades of a group of women in New York City, I could follow the sexual escapades of a group of women from my city, Accra, Ghana. So that's what I did. This is the web series An African City. It's a story of 5 successful, beautiful African females, Ghanaian and Nigerian, Nania, Sade, Makina, Ngozi, and Zainab, raised in the West, but migrating back home to their place of birth, Accra, Ghana, just like I did. They are single, they are fabulous, and they are dating. And their dating escapades no longer marginalizes women from the African continent into nameless victims on the front cover of poverty reports, but active participants in this worldwide human emotion that we are all looking for, love. What's been great about this journey is writing about sex, love, and relationships, the stories around these 3 things connects us in our similarities globally. This is why my favorite comment on YouTube is a woman who wrote, I was born in Puerto Rico, I live in New York, I've spent a lot of time in Italy, but what do I have in common with these girls? Everything. The image of this story has been on Elle, on BBC, on NPR, on CNN. Basically, it's been in media outlets around the world, and why that's important to me is because I'm hoping it will change the narrative, that there'll be a turning point in the narrative of Africa, a shift in the narrative of Africa, and even if the shift may be small, the trajectory could be great. This is why I consider An African City more than just a TV show. It's a movement. Armored in the outfits of Ghanaian fashion designers Amayo and Christy Brown, it sends the message, we will no longer tolerate the single narrative of Africa. Surrounded by the music of Ghanaian musicians Rian Benson and Lady J, it sends the message, we will no longer tolerate the single narrative of Africa. Decorated in the home decor of set designers Doll Living and Blueprint Africa, it sends the message, we will no longer tolerate the single narrative of Africa. We'll be creating more stories, stories with global visibility, stories that are my Ghana, your Ghana, our Africa. But in creating this series, I've been struck by some of the criticism. In me and others trying to take the pen out of the hands of the West, there's this frenzy over whom should hold the pen. Are Africans living abroad allowed to hold it? Are Africans who were raised abroad, like I was, allowed to hold it? Is the pen only allowed to be held by those who never left the continent? Are you only allowed to hold the pen if you are less fortunate? Does privilege exempt you from the right to hold the pen? There's a lot of bickering over what is African and what is authentically African, policing Africanism, policing what is authentically African. And the bickering is exhausting. The pen is big enough for us all. The battle is not with each other, at least it shouldn't be. We are on the same team with the same ultimate goal. All the stories, from the Dark Continent rhetoric to the Africa Rising rhetoric, are valid. Because there are parts of our continent that are dark. And there are parts of our continent that are on the rise. And then there's the human stories in between. And then there are these 5 women and the men they date. Let's change the narrative. Find what inspires you. Know what your Africa is. And then find the right digital platform to share that story with the world. And if the inspiration for one of those stories, out of the many stories needed, comes from a device that women use to massage their backs, well, that would be just fabulous. Thank you.